Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to, on behalf of us all here at the Calmast Studios, I'd like to welcome you to the opening of two exhibitions this evening. This one downstairs, Experiments and Considerations Touching Colours by Nuala Clark, and upstairs we have Men at Work by Con Monich and Katie Butchell. So, before we start, I'd like to acknowledge our funding sources: the Arts Council of Ireland, Mayo County Council, Hubble, and the Department of Culture, Heritage, and the Gill. I'd like to, so we've two guest speakers here for this show, for the downstairs show, and then I'd invite you after that to move upstairs to view the Men at Work show, and there'll be Katie Butchell will speak up there. Okay, so even though there's two speakers, they promise to be short, and they're from a science background, so you can relax. So to start off, the question is, those of you at the back of the room, can you recite Boyle's Law? Can anybody recite Boyle's Law from the junior cert? Or the leaving cert? Okay. Okay, well, you may have forgotten it, and I've forgotten it, but Ian, could you have a go at it?
Is it pressure and height and area?
Yeah, you get 40%.
It's when you turn the vessel upside down, the pressure of the air.
You have to have, okay, so it's the volume of an ideal gas is inversely proportional to its absolute pressure at a constant temperature. That sounds like art speak. Which means, in other words, that means, because I'm none the wiser, I'm sure. In other words, the product of pressure and volume is constant for a fixed mass of ideal gas at fixed temperature. So now you know. You'll always know that. So what's interesting about Robert Boyle is this work is based on some of his writings, or informed by, influenced by. And we know he lived in that great castle in West Watford, and which is now a venue for fine art as well as everything else. So anyway, gardening and all that. So our two speakers are Cordula Weiss and Eoin Gill. They work at the Waterford Institute of Technology. They're involved in a thing called Calmast. And it seems to be a program, an institute or a program for developing an interest in science and maths and stuff like that. And we all know the concept of STEM subjects, which is all to do with science and maths and all that. And it always comes up on the radio when they talk about STEM subjects, promoting STEM subjects. They always want to add an A to make it STEAM subjects. And the A, of course, as always, stands for art. And the Calmast project has worked with children with art projects as well, and worked with art centres down in Watford. So please welcome, all the way from Watford, first up Cordula Weiss, and then Eoin Gill.
For inviting us up here to Westport. We're both delighted to be here, and myself as a scientist, I think it's amazing how science and art come together and how Nuala Clark is the inspiration, and the books of Robert Boyle, one of the most famous scientists, to come up with this exhibition here. Robert Boyle was a scientist and born in somewhere in rural Ireland in this moor down in West Waterford. He was the 15th child of the Boyle family, and he was born in the 17th century, so this is probably not great to kind of be marked for prosperity or anything. But if you throw into the mix that he was the 15th child, but he was born to one of the richest families back in the time. So his father, Richard Boyle, he was the richest man in Ireland and in Britain, and I think this changed things a good bit. So Robert Boyle was born in 1627 in Lismore Castle, which as you were saying, is now also a Center for Fine Arts. And he went on to change the course of civilization, actually. He was born to Richard Boyle and Catherine Fenton. He was the 50th child and the 7th son of this family. And his dad, Richard Boyle, he actually came to Ireland with only 18 pounds in his pocket. So back then, nobody knew that he would go on to be one of the richest men in Britain and in Ireland. And he also became the Earl of Cork. So he was quite big here in the country, and that of course made things a lot easier for his family, for his children, and especially Robert Boyle, as he was the youngest son and not one of the oldest, so he didn't have all those obligations, but he was free. He did have the inheritance, of course, but he was free to kind of follow his own ideas. So he toured through Europe and then followed his kind of inspiration as well, and went more into science and natural science, and became one of the most famous scientists of his time. If you want to understand Boyle's work, I think we also need to know, or we need to consider the prevailing ideas at the time. So we're talking 17th century. Back then, all the workings of nature, they have been explained through scripture or through Aristotle. And if you think back, again, school coming up all the time, if you think back about the modern scientists of the time, that was not just Boyle, but also Galileo and Newton, they more believed in careful observation and experiments. And this is also where Boyle comes in again. So before, the prevailing idea of color was that color is a primary quality, so something like the size of an object or the weight, dimensions. And Aristotle said that color is the property of an object and it's transmitted by the object into our eyes. And he also said, and I think this is something you can understand even today, hot and cold are related to colors as well. So a red body, for example, would be associated with hot, the hot body, and white would be associated with coldness. So it's something I think that we still understand today just intuitively. But what Boyle said instead is that color is actually a secondary quality. It's perceived by the brain through the information that we get through our senses, like sight, looking at a picture, looking at one of those wonderful paintings here in the room.